towards collective outcomes in addressing this crisis. What we have made very clear is that a three-pronged approach is required. The military effort and the process of reconciliation and engagement, the need to increase humanitarian assistance to those that have been affected by the crisis, and of course the need to address the long-term development needs of this crisis, which we call literally addressing the root causes, which are developmental in nature. So the UN's effort is to work together with the government to address these issues. We also strongly believe that we need to localize our response so that we can build national capacity of national institutions to be able to continue this work after the UN is out.
From your first-hand experience and observation, what is the statistics of those, directly affected by the crisis?
Based on the humanitarian needs overview that was conducted together with the government, especially the Interministerial Task Force, there are about 14 million people that have been affected by the Boko Haram crisis in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. Of these, 8.5 million people need urgent humanitarian assistance in these three worst affected states, or what we call the epicenter of the crisis. And from these 8.5 million people, the United Nations and the government and the states, we are trying to target 6.9 million people who are most affected by this crisis.
By what timeline? Are you using what timeline?
What I have been trying to get my colleagues in the United Nations to appreciate is that we need to put out this fire, and that the timeline we have is maximum 18 months, or else this crisis can be protracted. In
18 months, you want to target 6.9 million people?
Now, in 2017, our plan is to target 6.9 million people. But what I'm saying is that we should work so hard to try to address this crisis in minimum longest period in 18 months.
You talked about reconstruction and peace building. You even advocated for negotiation and conflict resolution. And these are the nitty-gritties, really. How are you going about this?
In our early recovery engagement, peace building, reconciliation are critical elements. So what we are doing is trying to ensure that whatever we do in early recovery, in supporting early recovery activities, that these elements are mainstream in our approaches and in our engagement with society. That is one approach to it. And we are also trying to do that in parallel and trying to build national institutions that will try to provide basic services in the worst affected areas. So what I'm saying essentially is that we need to bridge this humanitarian development divide, which you might have heard about. But what it essentially means is we need to be flexible, we need to be agile, and we need to adapt our engagement based on the context. One thing I've learned quickly in the three worst affected states is that the context differ from one state to another, which means that our strategies have to be adapted to the current realities in the different states. In Adamawa and Yobe, people are returning to their homes of origin. They are not able to reach their final destination because of total lack of services. Some of them are merely staying in the centers of LGAs, local government areas, and we need to work with the government to ensure that basic services are provided and that the final destination is secured so that they can go back and start rebuilding their lives, moving ahead. When you look at Borno, the extent of the humanitarian crisis is quite severe, and that is reflected in the large number of displaced people.
How many people there are displaced?
The statistics varies between 1.7, 1.8 million of people that have been displaced. And the interesting dynamics of that statistics is that 76% of that population is living with host communities. Only the remaining percentage is staying in camps.
All right, hold on with your thoughts. We're still with the resident coordinator of the United Nations. We'll be right back on issues to do with the insurgency across the country. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We're still with the resident coordinator of the United Nations, Mr. Edward Callon. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
At this time, how is the UN going to help infrastructure-wise the government to, help shape the people's lives again?
The critical ingredient of our strategy and approach is Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Goals, which are more or less a broader framework to support the government of Nigeria and the people to achieve their development aspirations. And the Sustainable Development Goals are quite universal. And these goals, as far as I'm concerned, are based on national priorities and are based on national visions moving ahead. So the UN is working with the government of Nigeria and states to try to see how we can mainstream the Sustainable Development Goals into national plans and sub-national plans, and also work on supporting governments in areas of policy integration, resource management, to implement these goals. What I propose is a series of Marshall plans of the SDGs as various areas, in various states. And I will be proposing a human development report for Northeast Nigeria, which will give an overview of the status of development in this area, and also work with the states on a Marshall plan to implement the SDGs. We will also do similar works with other states so that we can have pockets of Marshall plans that we contribute to an overall national development plan.
How much cooperation are you getting from states?
A lot of states are willing. It's a slow process, but a lot of states are willing to start implementing the SDGs. Some of them have already started, and we are in the process of expanding our outreach.
How do you monitor the process?
The process has to be nationally monitored, and one of the areas we want to engage is improving on statistics, and also helping develop national statistics and national monitoring systems for the implementation of the SDGs.
The Oslo conference is coming up. I mean, you mentioned next month. How is this really going to help in a large scale what we're planning to do here in the country?
The United Nations and partners launched the Humanitarian Response Plan in December. The response plan was asking for $1 billion to provide assistance to 6.9 million people that have been severely affected by the Boko Haram crisis. The government of Nigeria, the government of Norway, and Germany are organizing this conference on the 24th of February to raise an awareness about the impact of the Boko Haram crisis, and also help mobilize resources to respond to the impact of the crisis. It is also clear that while the humanitarian situation is improving, but as new areas get liberated, the needs are increasing. We also want to ensure that whatever resources is made available for the donors, that we also invest in return and also early recovery, so that people can start rebuilding their lives. Those are the basic fundamental starting points of the whole sustainable development agenda for Northeast. From there, we can go into more sophisticated development approaches and strategies. But first is trying to get people to go back to their homes, start rebuilding their lives.
So more specifically, how much financially are you putting in?
We are appealing to the member states for $1 billion for 2017. In 2015, we appealed for $480 million, but we received only 52% of that. Of that request, which translated to roughly $225 million. But the needs have increased as new areas become liberated. So this year we are appealing for $1 billion so that we can provide assistance to 6.9 million people in the worst affected areas in Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa.
So do you have an effective monitoring strategy in place? Because, I mean, many people wonder at this sort of the amounts involved. And again, we hear again and again of how the IDPs are suffering. You know, for instance, in Abuja here, you know, I talked with one of the IDPs, the one in charge of some of the areas here, and he spoke so despondently about how people are suffering from lack of food and the likes of it. So the kind of help they get is not what they're looking for.
Indeed, as I said, the needs are early. The needs are very large or high from whatever perspective you want to look at it from. But one thing I want to put across is that the United Nations is an accountable and a transparent institution. And we are implementing these programs directly with the state government. And also we are working with non-governmental organizations. And one of the major focus of our work is accountability. So we have a robust monitoring system in place moving ahead.
Interesting. Mr. Edward Kalon, thank you very much for your time on
A pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Good.